Aloha and welcome everybody to a special presentation today. We've talked about legendary and lost cities, specifically Hyperborea, the Garden of Eden, Atlantis, Avalon, El Dorado, Lemuria, Shangri-La, Thule. So many different legendary and lost cities, and it's really interesting and also the subject of my next book that I'm writing as a part of my Ancient Oblivion series. So I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who's joining us today in the chat. Welcome to all of the returning subscribers and members and the brand new members and subscribers here on my channel. I want to jump right into things, and we're gonna go over a lot of interesting stuff. Today we're talking about the lost city of Iram. It goes by different names and different spellings. So we'll go over all of the etymology and what Iram means and where this place probably is located. Over and across time, people and experts the world across have been looking for legendary and lost cities and places like the Garden of Eden, like the Fountain of Youth, right? And Islam is no exception. Islam has an interesting legendary and lost city that is mentioned in the Quran itself. So the first thing we're going to do is jump right into things. Oh, and stay tuned after this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and get your comments pulled up and hang out in the chat. We'll do like a Q&A and just a casual hangout after the presentation. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and get some screen sharing pulled up, and we're going to dive right into this presentation. Boom. All right, cool. There's everybody in the old chat. Boom. All right, cool. Now we're going to start off with Iram of the Pillars. This says Iram of the Pillars, also called Irum or Iram, Erim, Erum, Ubar, or the City of the Pillars, is considered a lost city, a region or a tribe that is mentioned in the Quran. And if we go ahead and go to that verse, this is Iram in the Quran. Right here, it says, the Quran mentions Iram in connection with Imad, or pillars. And this is what the Quran has to say about this legendary city that has these huge pillars that were so lofty that they were said to just reach far up into the heavens. And there was no other city like this that had such towering pillars that shot up into the skies. And it says here, have you not considered how your Lord dwelt with Ahad, with Iram, who had lofty pillars? Whenever it says lofty like that, it means like never before. It means incomparable to any type of a building or a structure. This is something that it's implied is godlike in its creation. It says, the likes of whom had never been created in the lands, and with Thamud, who carved out the rocks in the valley. That's an interesting thing too. So we have a correlation with these huge pillars that reached up into the heavens and the earth being terraformed in the same area. And it goes on to say here, and with the Pharaoh firm of might, whom oppressed within the lands and increased therein the corruption. So your Lord poured upon them a scourge of punishment. Essentially, this mythic and legendary city, just like Lemuria and Atlantis, which we've talked about many different times, there was a corruption that started to develop within this city. And because of that degradation of society and because of that corruption, God decided to rain down fire from the heavens and destroy this particular legendary city. And it says, indeed, your Lord is in observation. That means that the Lord is watching, or God is watching, or however you'd like to say that. But this is a direct quote from the Quran. So we have a legendary and lost city, much like, it sounds a lot like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah is that they started getting worse and worse and worse as, hey, welcome to the channel. We got a new member, Carso Picasso. So as Sodom and Gomorrah got worse and worse, then it was destroyed ultimately, just like Atlantis, just like Lemuria, and many of these other mythic and legendary cities. All right. Okay, so now let's move on to this next thing here. So check this out. It says, as an area, it has been identified with the biblical region known as Aram. Now, this is really interesting, and now we're going to get into the etymology. I have found out and discovered through my life's studies and practices and experiences and works that etymology is a very useful and crucial tool to sort of reverse engineer our forgotten history, right? We have lost touch with what these words mean. We don't know what our letters mean in our alphabets. Many of you don't even know what your very own names mean. And if you don't, I highly recommend starting there. Start with your own name. Figure out what your name means, because names and words are descriptors. And the further back in time we go, we can see that the letters originally were pictures, and they would put picture after picture to form context, which we call today words, and then more of those sentences, and then stories, right? So it's very important to figure out what Iram means. This says that it's directly related to a region known as Aram, or you could say Aram, okay? If you want to say it with like a cowboy accent, Aram or Aram, right? This is really interesting. So we're going to figure out what Iram of the pillars means. Obviously, we already know what pillars are: columns, pillars, beams, and these are the things that we've been referencing on my channel for years now. We've talked about these terrestrial beams of light that shoot upwards and touch the sky. And there's correlations to the pillars of Hercules and many other things where these poles shot up from within the earth herself. And that energy shoots up to the sky in the form of light, which creates a beam, which can then take on different shapes as that fluid interacts with our fluid that we call atmosphere. And they're seen to dance about, but they are electromagnetic in nature, and they're capable, and the legends and the myths indicate that they brought magic to the world, or what we would call magic today, right? So these things change the world. And when they appear, the world goes into a different epoch. It goes into a different age. Everything that we considered to be normal changes completely, and our way of life changes completely. And when those beams retract, the same thing happens. Our entire way of life, everything that we are used to, changes because the energy in our world goes into flux, right? We have an influx of energy, which brings about a time and an age of myths and legends and monsters and creatures and heroes and anti-heroes and gods and fallen beings and phantazoids and all kinds of interesting things that happen. And when those beams retract, those gods are seen to have or thought to have like left the earth, and the earth goes into mourning, and the people go into mourning, and everyone becomes sad because the land is suffering, and there are famines, and there are sicknesses, and entropy increases exponentially over the years. Some people might refer to this as the fall or sin being introduced into the world. And our society, our world at large, becomes degraded. And it gets worse and worse and worse, as you can see evidenced by the modern age that we live in today, right? So the good news is, even though we might live right now during a time where the energy is dwindling, and therefore, and subsequently, society is falling apart, we have something to look forward to because we know what has already happened in the past. It's the law of cycles and rhythms. What has happened before is destined to repeat itself. So let's check out this word, Aram. Now, Aram is basically... let's see, it's basically 3 letters in ancient Hebrew or Phoenician. It's the letter A. You see this letter A right there? That is an ox head. I thought I had a picture of it, but I can't remember if I pulled it up. But anyways, I'll just tell you what it is. The letter A is Aleph, and in the ancient picture form, the letter A was actually the head of an ox. And if you go further back, it was an entire ox body. And that ox represented strength and power and leadership and things along those lines, right? So we have something that is representative of strength and power, followed by the word Ram or Rum or Rem. Basically, the further back in time you go, the less vowels were in existence. Vowels were introduced into many different languages, if not all of them, in order to force a particular accent and dialect onto the people so that they knew and they kept a certain pronunciation, therefore keeping their language alive, right? Because if they didn't put those vowels in there to force a certain pronunciation, then people's accents and dialects would change over time, which would lead and give rise to entirely different languages. So they introduced vowels over time. But the further back in time you go, they really didn't have what we would call vowels today. So that last word, Ram, is very interesting. Let's take a look at this here. Let's see. Let's go ahead and I'm going to skip forward just a bit. I want to share this with you. This is really interesting. So if we look at the word Ram, now here it is with the vowel. Okay, in the middle you have what is known as the Vav, right, which is the letter 6. And it's also equates to the letter U, V, W, sometimes the letter F as well. But this wasn't originally there. So it was just R and M, which is really the R is a head and the letter M means waters or head waters, which is really interesting too. But if we take a look at this word rum, right? You see how it says rum right there? Just like Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, he's always saying, "Why is the rum gone?" or whatever, right? I feel like that's a play on those pillars, those sky pillars, that inner earth energy, the energy of the earth itself being released. Right now it's charging, right? So something that is charging is inevitably going to release that energy, and the earth is no exception, right? So whenever those pillars retract, the Ram is gone, or the rum is gone. And I think that's why Jack Sparrow, that's sort of the esoteric joke behind that, right? So let's see what rum means, or ram, or ram. You could say ram too. So let's check this out. If we take a look at this, it means to rise up specifically, to be high, right? As in like to be lifted up on high, to be lofty, exactly how it says, the description for these pillars. They were called lofty pillars, great pillars, tall pillars, exceedingly high pillars. It means to be exalted. Exalted means to be lifted up from the ground. Okay, so it's to be like picking up a child and holding them up into the air. That is an exaltation, right? It also means to be high, to be set on high, to be raised or to be raised up, to be uplifted, to be exalted, to be lifted, and to rise. We'll go ahead and keep on going for a bit here. To rise or to rear children, something that comes up out of something else, which the quintessential root for that is the earth herself giving birth to something, which is this light of the world that shoots up from within the inner earth recesses. And it says to cause to grow up, just like a plant that starts off inside of the earth. It starts off inside of the earth and it rises up towards the sky. That's what ram, all of these similar words, that's their origin. That's what it means. It means to lift up, to raise up, to exalt. And by extension, it came to be known as other things like to praise or to lift your hands up into the air, etc. To be lifted up, specifically from the earth. You can see it says to raise, to lift up, to take up, to erect, to exalt, to set on high, to lift up, to remove, like from the earth, to lift up, and to present, to contribute, to offer. And these are sort of extensions of that. Okay, so ram, or Iram, or Aram, or Aram, right, means something that is powerful, that is lifted up from the earth, just like that inner earth energy that we've talked about so many different times, right? I refer to it as the blue beam, right? Because I believe that I have a theory that, and I have reason to believe that those beams are mostly comprised of ionized oxygen, and that oxygen, whenever we go through this next age that we're about to head into, the earth will fill up with fresh oxygen once more, right? For an entire age, just shooting fresh oxygen up into our skies, right? Which is really interesting because that's going to have an impact on the next apocalypse after this one that we're going to go through. We're going to go through the fire apocalypse, which is really the plasma apocalypse. But the next one after that, the flood or the deluge of ancient times will return because there will be so much oxygen up there in the sky that the next time that the atmosphere depressurizes and that hole blows open in our sky, ionized hydrogen comes down and smashes into all of that oxygen, creating water. Lots of water that will rain down and flood the world once more. The good news is we're not going to go through that one next. I don't believe we're going through another flood during the next go round. But you and I must get ready for the fire, the world to be purified through fire. All right, cool. So now that we have a better understanding of what Iram means, power that is lifted up into the air, right? Let's take another look at some stuff here. Let's see. Okay, so it says here, rather than being a city, an interpretation of the evidence suggested that Ubar was more likely to have been a region because this place was also kind of known as Ubar. There's different names for it. Was more likely to have been a region, the land of the, this is actually an I, a capital I. Excuse me. So it's the land of the Yobarite, right? This is really interesting. I'm going to break this down. Now, first, check this out. This name right here means with, of, or from a bar, literally a bar, right? We talked about the bar symbolism, the columns, the bars, the pillars, all of these different words. This city was known as Ubar, or of the bars, the city of the bar, or if there's more than one of them, multiple bars, right? And the bar was the meeting place, just like the pole. The pole was the meeting place. That pole that comes up out of the earth was the light, and people went to that light after the apocalypse. The wise men or women, or both, of the world saw the light, and they went towards that light because there were places of safety, places of power, and places of life, essentially. Right? So that's why people meet up at the bar. That's why they meet up at the pole, etc. from ancient times. Now it says Ubar was more likely to have been a region, the land of the Iobarite, identified by Ptolemy. Ptolemy was an ancient mathematician, very well known in academics and modern academics, right? He made reference to this place. He actually made his own map of the world and described this region of people filled with people that he called the Iobarite. So let's break down this word real quick. Essentially, let's start with these first two letters right here. Io. I-O. So let's check that out. There is a goddess named Io. I-O. In Greek mythology. These goddesses are fertility goddesses, typically because they are a personification, right, or a cartoonification, which is my favorite word, of those beams of light as they shot up into the sky in the form of plasma, twisting and writhing like an ancient serpent that reached up and touched the heavens. And at first, it just shot straight up. So at first, it's just a beam, but afterwards, after some time, it starts to fluctuate, right, and develop little eddies and pools and stuff because it is a fluid within a fluid. So it starts to branch out and it looks like a tree or a stick figure in the sky, and it's moving about. And people who witnessed this interpreted it through their own perception filters, and they described it in the way that most of us would. They cartoonified it, they related it, they personified it to things that they could already understand if they had no idea what ionized oxygen was or plasma, right? So they described these things in sort of a comic book type of a form, right? And these became religions and myths and legends and stories that were passed down through word of mouth, that were passed down on paper. They were written down. They were carved into our rocks and became petroglyphs that people wonder about to this very day because we have forgotten the apocalypse. We have forgotten the reset that we go through, that we must go through if things get bad. That's why these things always happen and befall legendary cities or even the world at large whenever things are starting to get really bad. The earth cleanses everything. The earth makes everything right and puts us all back onto an equal playing field. In ancient Judaism and the ancient Hebrew people, they called it, others as well, they called it the year of Jubilee. It was the year of freedom when the earth set the captives free. Now let's go back to Yo, okay? So just as a reminder, we're going to break down this word that was used by Ptolemy, and it was a name for these people who came from this place called Iram of the Pillars. They were called the Yo Bar Ite. So Yo is this goddess, right? Yo, what's up? Is this goddess. Yo in Greek mythology, daughter of Inachus, the river god of Argos, which is really interesting too, but we'll save that for another time. Let's see, I believe I have something highlighted. It says Yo, or EO, however you'd like to. It's like Captain EO, basically. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Captain EO. Same type of thing. Yo was identified with the Egyptian goddess Isis and Epaphus with Apis, the sacred bull. Now, the reason that these sacred bulls are often identified with these fertility goddesses, and it's not always female, right? It just depends on the person's perception, right? A beam of light is neither male nor female because it is not physical like we are physical. I mean, it is physical in a sense, but it's light. Okay, it's not a person, it's not an animal or anything. It doesn't have sexual organs or anything like that. But people perceived it as having such, depending on their perspective and where they were located in the world and what it was doing at the time as it interacted within that fluid. It says Yo was identified with the Egyptian goddess Isis, right? And then it goes on to say the sacred bull as well. That sacred bull is how the light changes around that opening in the sky after the apocalypse. It creates crescents and other forms and shapes up there. So it's that bull is always directly above. Those horns are always directly above these gods and goddesses, typically. It says Epaphus was said to have been carried off by order of Hera to Byblos in Syria, where he was found again by Io. This part of the legend connects Io with the Syrian goddess Astarte, or Ishtar, or Ashtar, Ishtar, Easter, you could say too. These are all fertility goddesses. These are all goddesses of wisdom. Sometimes it was a god, sometimes it was a male figure, right? But oftentimes it was seen as something that brought about fertility, which means life. Everything began to procreate after so much death had been introduced into the world, after a reset, after everything was wiped out, after flooding and liquefaction and earthquakes and plasma and lightning and all kinds of crazy things that happened for an entire week long. After that, once we go through and complete that electromagnetic reversal of our world, or polarity shift, you could call it, then the energy reverses and those beams of light shoot up into the sky and fill our world with energy once more. People who lived closest to those beams of light, they were able to get the most benefit from it, obviously, right? But that's why they're often seen as fertility goddesses. And oftentimes too, now that I think about it, this is personified in like many video games as a princess, right? Usually it is a princess that is very wise or very powerful. And that princess is always getting captured and taken within the earth or locked away in a tower or locked away in a castle, which are all different ways of saying a mountain, basically, a volcano, a volcanic mountain. I believe that many, if not all, of our world's volcanoes will be sites of these future beams of light, right? But right now, they're all sort of, many of them are sealed up for good reason, but that seal will be broken whenever that ionized oxygen shoots out and erupts once more. And then that will create these poles where people will gather, which will be called polises or cities, right? All right, cool. Now, so that word bar, that was really interesting too. That actually reminded me of this Urbano Monte map that was made in the 1500s. We've gone over this map many different times. Lots of interesting anomalies on this map, but I want to sort of zoom in on this region right here. You can see this is the middle of the world. This is the center of the world, and there is an island paradise. This is a mysterious island. This is a strange, forgotten, mystic island, an esoteric island, a hidden island. This is the island that people do not talk about. This island was featured on various maps all throughout the centuries up until about the 1700s. Then it started to disappear. Probably because it sank into the ocean, or the ocean levels, the waters rose and they continue to rise. But they also say that this land just sank down into the waters. Now, this land is divided into 4 parts, right? And the legends and even the maps, whenever you translate like this ancient Italian and Latin and stuff, they'll tell you that 2 of these sections of this 4-part lost continent, 2 of these sections were essentially desert, and the other 2 were essentially filled with vegetation and whatnot. This is the original Hyperborea. This is the garden, right? With a G for garden. I don't know if it's for garden, but it's a G right there in the middle. The G symbolizes a foot in the ancient picture form, and it meant a destination, a place to go to, a place that you would take a pilgrimage to. And that's why they stick that G right there in the middle at 90 degrees at the top of the world, or the head of the world, you could say, which is the letter R in ancient picture form. But if we go over here, we've talked about how the Tartarian race and people and tribe, who also go by many other names, just Tartarian is one of the things that they're called, that they may have actually taken a path that went from the original Euphrates River, which is this right here that splits into 7 heads, because it's so low on this side and the current is not as bad as on the other side, right? That they were able to leave this place, circle down, stop in this little cathode island of life. There's an anode and a cathode mountain as well. And then they kind of went over here to the adjoining lands, right? Outside of the Garden of Eden, we could say. And this is one of the places where they set up camp. The Tartarians, as you can see, it says Mare Tartaro. Mare means the sea. Tartaro means of Tartarus or the Tartarians, etc., right? And Tartar just means tree, or the tree of trees. So these people are those who came from the tree of trees, or the axis mundi, or the center of the world where the tree of life grew. All right, so this place right here is called Bargo, which is really interesting. You see this word bar. It means the same back then as it does today, essentially, right? Even in some languages, it implies offspring. Okay, it implies like the son of somebody, right? And that's because it is begotten by the earth originally. The earth is seen as giving birth to this light, right? So people took that and applied it to giving birth to their children as well. So Bargo is one of these places where the ancient Tartarian people first set up camp. As you can see, their camp's right there. So let's see what go means. Let's see if we look it up in if we check out the etymology of the word go, obviously it means to like move in a direction and in a destination or something. But in Old English, it is gone, right? Remember whenever I made reference to the princess being locked away and always kidnapped in these various video games like The Legend of Zelda, the Mario Brothers, etc., right? The bad guy who kidnaps the princess in The Legend of Zelda, his name is actually Gan On, which means one of the people who Gan, we're going to find out what Gan means right now, right? So Genin actually means somebody who advances, walks, departs, goes away, right? So it implies to leave. To go means to go away, to leave where you are and to go somewhere else, right? To happen, to take place, to conquer. This is an interesting one too. To observe, aka to watch. The observers, the watchers. To practice, to exercise, etc. And it basically comes from, as you can see all these various forms of go. They have the G and the N. Gan. Gan, 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 gan. And it's really interesting too because in ancient Hebrew, gan means garden. That's really interesting. So people who left the garden, people who walked away from the garden, people who ran away because they were seen as being chickens, right? We've talked about that many times too, the chicken symbolism, because they left their place of safety. They left their garden and they departed from that place. So if we go back to that map, Bargo means the place of those who left the bar. The place of those who settled and they came from somewhere else, which was the place of the bar or the place of the pillars, the place of the columns, etc., right? All right, cool. Now, Let's see. We already talked about the etymology of Ram. That's a very interesting one. You can also apply that to the ancient city of Rome, right? It's exactly the same thing. And I hope that helps you out in your studies as well. Now, this is really interesting too. Keep this in mind. We're about to get deep, okay? I'm going to bring up this website right here, and we're going to go over so much information on Iram of the Pillars, and I'm going to comment on it all the way. But I don't want to forget this because it's going to mention the number 1,000. It's going to talk about 1,000 pillars that actually shoot up all over the place, right? There's one main one, right, which is Mount Meru at the center of the world. That's the biggest opening, so it will be the largest, widest, tallest pillar of light that shoots up into the sky that everyone in the entire world will be able to see at least some portion of it, right? Obviously, the further away you are, the less you'll be able to see the bottom portion, and the closer you are, the more you'll be able to see all of it, right? So this is really interesting. Keep in mind 1,000, right? Now remember, Iram, right? That first letter is Aleph, like I talked about, the head of the ox. That letter represents a number. Aleph is the first letter, which corresponds to the number 1. But whenever you go through the entire alphabet and you come back to Aleph, it represents the number 1,000, right? 1,000 Ram, 1,000 places of power that are lifted up into the sky, or energetic beams, basically. And we're going to get to that in this little article here too. So we're going to go over this entire article. I'm going to comment on it all the way. In the chat, I've got the chat in front of me right here. What's up, Hopi? I see you. I see lots of people in the chat, actually. I don't want to single people out. But if you stick around, when I'm done, I'm going to jump into the chat. I'm going to put your comments onto the screen. And, I want you guys to all participate. If you hear something that reminds you of some information or your studies or your experiences or theories or whatever, feel free to share that in the chat. All right, so let's start off right here. If you want to check out this website, by the way, it's called thecomradegeneral.wordpress.com. And you'll be looking for the lost city of Iram, the city of the jinn. That's what this article is called right here. Filled with I had all kinds of websites pulled up, and I was just going to pick and choose. And then I found this one. This one contains all of it. So this is really interesting. It starts off by saying esoteric knowledge, Hermetica, mysteries of the universe, mystery school. So these are all the different things you can find on this website. We're going to focus on Iram of the Pillars. Now keep in mind, this spelling changes, right? These letters change. The letters that are constant are the R and the M. These vowels are sort of seen as being interchangeable, okay? The city of the pillars. These are the light pillars that explode from inside of the earth and fill our world with energy once more, allowing for things like longer lifespans, healthier living, magic, and different capabilities and powers that people inherit, essentially. And he calls it the city of the jinn. Really interesting. The city of the jinn. It's got a really cool picture here too. I like these kinds of pictures. Now, the tribe of jinn, or DN, which is appropriate because he didn't include the vowel. Sumerian Dingir, which is represented by this glyph right here, usually translated as Digir. Sumerian pronunciation is a Sumerian word for god or goddess. Very interesting. The tribe of Dan, Jinn. Jinn and Dan both correlate with giants, or aka the Nephilim. The root of Nephilim is Nepal, just like the country, right? Nepal, it means to come down. It means to fall down, to float down. There's legends that talk about these beings that fell from the heavens, right? The most famous story is the biblical narrative, or at least to me, that's the most famous one, where the angels fell down from the heavens, right? I believe that they floated down because our atmosphere changed and we had an increased buoyancy factor in our world, which affected what we now call today its opposite, which is labeled as gravity. But really, our buoyancy in the fluid that we walk around in called atmosphere was increased for a time. And so that allowed these beings to safely float on down and land like superheroes and not be hurt or anything. All right, so Jinn and Dan both correlate with giants, aka the fallen ones, or the Nephilim, and serpent mythos. Iram, Irin, translates to watcher in Aramaic. Now, I want to point this out too. Aramaic, Aramaic, comes from Aram, right? Comes from the exact thing that we're studying. That entire language and culture comes from that word, Aram, Iram, of the pillars. Ubar. Ubar is really interesting. JL, hey, welcome, JL. All right, so Ubar is really interesting. You're going to see that it's directly related to this word, Uber, right? So let's read this. Ubar, Ubed, Anunnaki culture. The Turkish word Uber, which means witch. Interesting. So now we have a correlation from this place called Ubar, which reminds me of the map that we looked at, Bargo, right? Ubar, Bargo, etc. They're directly related to one another. And witches, which are beings, humans, essentially, or humanoids that are known to be imbued with some sort of force or some sort of a power or magic that was different from people who lived further away from these places of power. Uper is another way of saying that. Upir, like umpire, vampire. You see where we're going with that, right? Similar things. People who have power. Aupir, upire, aupire, ovpire. There's different pronunciations for these things, which means they turn into different words. So you can make many different correlations here. The Sanskrit word upari or up-ari or up-arya, right? Meaning overlord. The descendants of early vampires were the sacred Ubed race, who 1 millennium later settled Mesopotamia and founded the Anunnaki religion of the Sumerians in 3500 BC. Their Transylvanian ancestors were the Anunnaki gods themselves. Now, I want to also point out this word here, right? You see this? Sylvan? Sylvan is like foresty, or you could say it harkens back to the garden, basically, right? So those people who lived in the forest, those people who lived in the garden paradise were Sylvan. And that's why there's a direct correlation between vampires and other beings of power and the elven race, or the El, or those of the El, their offspring, the Elu, right? All right, so let's go ahead and move on here. It says that the name of this Semurum king, Eden Sin. Interesting. Sin or sin? Eden Sin, right? Sin. Eden Sin. That's really interesting. Like the Garden of Eden and original sin. You could make that correlation. Sin has a lot more to do with the moon, though, in these ancient non-Christian histories, basically. All right, so the name of the Semurum king, Eden Sin, with the Dengir, initial silent honorific, and then symbol for divine, basically. The star symbol, this one right here, which can also be pronounced as An or On, right? Which is also the name of various sky gods. That's why that sky god is represented by this star. That is the star. That is the not a tiny little star like a twinkling star like we have in our world right now. Not a planet like larger luminaries that are up there in the sky. This is a gigantic hole in the sky that allows the light of the heavens, you could say, which is, I believe, ionized hydrogen, to be seen. And it's seen as a gigantic, circular, glowing red circle, basically. So some people interpret that as being spherical, just like they do today. And so they would call it a huge red planet. Some people saw it as being an eye in the sky that opened up, and that gave rise to the evil eye, because that energy that drops down from above, it was typically seen as being evil or bad or something that is unfavorable to humanity, whereas its opposite, its counterpart, was the steady beam of light. So you have a hole and a beam, or a rod, right? The rod represents goodness and life and magic, etc. The red sky, or the red hole in the sky, or the red eye, you could say, represented evil, because that came down and it terraformed our world and caused devastation and destruction in the form of fiery plasma serpents from above. All right, let's continue on. An, or On, is used again, but phonetically in the middle of the name for the sound in the stela in this museum in Iraq. So in Iraq, they have like these ancient statues of allegedly these gods that many people say look like serpentine beings, and I can't disagree. They kind of do. But are they? Are they? I don't know. Interesting. Statues from the Ubaid period found in modern day Iraq. So here's some more of that. Check this out. You see that? You have a blue bird represented by this peacock right here that fans out. It's got its two legs standing on the Tet. This is the ancient symbol for the Tet right here. The Tet represents that garden paradise, that island in the center of the world with the four lands separated by four rivers, like I showed you earlier, right? So this is basically a symbolic element of the blue beam shooting up, touching the hole in the sky, and coming from the Tet, or the center of the world, Hyperborea, or Iram of the pillars. Now, let's get to Iram of the pillars. Iram of the pillars. It's got the Arabic form right here. An alternative translation is Iram of the tent poles. Now, this is getting super interesting. A tent pole or a tent peg is one that goes into the ground, and that gives you the symbol of the six and the Vav, right? Also called Iram. Iram, Eram, Ubar, or the city of the pillars, is considered a lost city, a region, or tribe that is mentioned in the Quran. The legend of Iram. The Quran mentions Iram in connection with the Imad, or the pillars. And we'll go ahead and read this again. This is the direct quote from the Quran itself. I'll read this a little quicker this time. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ahad, Iram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the lands, and with Tamud, who carved out the rocks in the valley, and with Pharaoh, owner of the stakes. Stake is another word for poles or pillars or beams or columns, etc., right? And that's why stakes are what kills vampires, okay? Vampires are seen as like those beings that come down from above, which is where all that, bad energy is or whatever, or cosmic energy, however you want to see it. And I'm not saying it's all bad out there. I'm just saying directly on the other side of our sky is that negative charge. And it's not good or bad, it's just a negative charge. How it affects us is interpreted as favorable or unfavorable, depending on what it does to your local region or your family or yourself. And it goes on and says, whom oppressed within the lands and increased therein the corruption. The people became corrupt. So your Lord poured upon them a scourge, a plague, an apocalyptic event of punishment. Indeed, your Lord is in observation, or your Lord is watching, right? There are several explanations for the reference to Iram, who had the lofty pillars. Not just pillars, lofty pillars. Now, I want to make something very clear. Many people believe that this was a place where they had just built just towers. You know what I mean? Like they were buildings. It was some sort of architecture or structure that was made by humans. Of course, humans would think that because we tend to, attribute all of these ancient wonders to ourselves and just take credit for it. However, there are things that nature can make, or you could say God. Or goddesses, or whatever you like to call it, okay? But energy from the earth and from the heavens is far more capable of creating things on a grander, more magnificent scale than humans ever could even dream of doing. Which you'll see some correlations to the Tower of Babel story and stuff like that in here too. Which remind me, we're going to need to do a Tower of Babel series or presentation as well. Now, some see this as a geographic location. I do. That's what this entire presentation is going to be explaining, the location of Iram of the pillars. Now, many people will put this into the Middle East. I don't think so. Just like they put the Euphrates into the Middle East, and just like they put so many other things like the Garden of Eden and stuff, like they try to force these things to the modern locations because that's where those stories exist in the modern day, or even going back, hundreds of years, because those people settled there and stayed there, and they brought with them their names and their legends and their stories, all of these things. So today we have forgotten about the esoteric past and the hidden history, and we attribute all of that esoteric history to these modern places as if they're not They're not renamed or anything. Hey, welcome. I cannot read that, but welcome to my channel. Good to have you. All right, let's continue on. Some see this as a geographic location, either in a city or an area. Others as the name of a tribe. I see it as both. The people were named after the place, right? Those identifying it as a city have made various suggestions as to where or what city it was, ranging from Alexandria or Damascus to a city which actually moved, or a city called Ubar. Now, this is interesting too. There's many correlations to various myths and legends, especially in Hinduism, where they have these floating cities, these moving cities that moved about and are connected with various apocalyptic stories as well. Now, let's continue on. It says, as an area, it's been identified with the biblical region known as Aram, which we already talked about. Meaning the ox head, power, might, strength, right? Even guidance and leadership, right? Something that is strong and powerful. And then Ram, being lifted up, right? It has also been identified as a tribe, possibly the tribe of Ad. I'm just going to call that Odd. These are your odd fellows, okay? With the pillars referring to tent pillars. The identification with of Wadi Rum, there's that word again, Rum. Wadi, I believe, just means river. If I remember that correctly. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it means river. The identification of the Wadi Rum with Iram and the tribe of Ad mentioned in the Quran has been purposed by scholars who have translated the Talmudic and the Nabatean inscriptions, referring to both the place Iram and the tribes of Ad and Tamud by name. Also, I just want to point this out before I forget it too, but in the Old Testament of the Bible, or in the Tanakh, or even the Torah, you could say, there's these stories of these objects that were used by the high priest. They were called the Urim and the Purim. The word Ur typically meant light or fire by extension, right? So oftentimes you'll see that as a root word, which is Or, Ur, Ir, and that gives rise to words that mean light in our modern language, like the auroras, the aurora borealis, etc., right? Now, we continue on. According to some Islamic beliefs, King Shaddad was the king of Iram of the Pillars, who defied the warnings of the prophet Hud. Now, this is another thing that you're going to see quite often, is right before the end times, right before these apocalyptic events, or these worldwide cataclysms that happen, you always have a rise of prophets. You have a rise within the mud and the muck of society and the degradation of morals and everything. You have a remnant that rises up, and all of a sudden they seem to just be imbued. Some of them, it's very few people, right? That's why it's called a remnant. But some of them just seem to be able to tune in and tap into and remember this forgotten ancient esoteric history, right? So because they remember it, they start sharing it, and they realize, because they are being fed this information from the earth energy itself, it's going to happen again. So they start talking about it, and they start telling people about it, and eventually word spreads, and these people become hated and made fun of and ridiculed in society to their own detriment, right? They become prophets, essentially. And they try to let people know, they try to warn people, like Noah was a prime example. Whereupon Allah smote the city, driving it into the sands. So this is why it's called the Atlantis of the Sands. So Iram of the Pillars is also known affectionately as the Atlantis of the Sands. It should be. It absolutely should be known as that, because if we go back to this Urbano Monte map from the 1500s, you can see this island landmass right here. This is Atlantis. Okay, this is my theory. I know some people think that it's like, in various places around the world, and in Africa or in the Atlantic Ocean or whatever, but it is my strong belief so far, based on my own personal research, okay, and you don't have to believe this, but this is me, that this island right here represents many, if not all, of these legendary lost places, okay? Maybe not all of them, but many of them, I would say, including Atlantis, which was also circular in nature. All right, I forgot where I was going with that. Let me get back to this little article. All right, whereupon Allah smote the city, driving it into the sands. Oh, so it sank. That's the whole thing I want to talk about. So Iram of the Pillars was known to have sunk down into the sands, right? When you have worldwide earthquakes, it causes what's known as liquefaction, where the water that is under the surface soil and stuff of our world, that water rises up and it liquefies the surface in many places, except for those places that are built on bedrock, obviously. And things sink down into the waters or into the mud or into the sand. If you live on sand, you can actually practice this. If you just get a little box of sand, put something on top of it like a rock or something, and just shake it real quick, vibrate it back and forth, and that rock it'll sink right down into the sand. And if you have something else that's already buried in that sand, it'll start to rise up to the top. It's really interesting. All right, never to be seen again, just like Atlantis, just like Lemuria, just like many other places. The ruins of this city are thought to be buried somewhere in the sands of Rub al-Khali. Joshua, hey, thanks Joshua Adams. Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. Iram became known to Western literature with the translation of the story, the city of many columned Iram and Abdullah, son of Abi Kilaba, in the book of 1001 Nights. So you've heard of the Arabic 1001 Nights, right? Like, Aladdin and all these various stories or whatnot, right? It makes a reference to the city of many columns, essentially, right? They're not talking about Ionic columns or pillars of Greek or Greco-Roman buildings. Those are symbolic and probably even useful as a style of architecture during a time when our atmosphere was more electromagnetically charged or electrically charged, right? When we had an electrically charged environment and they could redirect that energy into these buildings in different ways. But let's continue on here. It says here, do you not see what your Lord did? Okay, so it's just quoting that again here. Archaeological research. In November 1991, the remains of a settlement were discovered in southern Oman and hypothesized to be the legendary Lost City. I don't believe so. I believe that this is located at the North Pole. I believe that there's a lot of evidence for that if you look into comparative mythology and you find the similarities between all of these legendary and lost places. Claimed to have been destroyed by God. Now, that's another thing that these places all have in common, is they are destroyed from the heavens, okay? The stuff comes down from the sky and destroys these places. Let's see, let me skip this part here. It says, in 1992, this guy right here wrote a book called Atlantis of the Sands about the expedition. The term Atlantis of the Sands had originally been coined by T.E. Lawrence. Archaeologist Juris Zarins discussed Ubar in a 1996 Nova interview. And he says, there's a lot of confusion about that word. If you look at the classical texts and the Arab historical sources, Ubar refers to a region and a group of people, not to a specific town. People always overlook that. It's very clear on Ptolemy's 2nd century map of the era. Now, that's really interesting too. If you check out Ptolemy's map that he made, you can see all across it where he wrote Tartaria, right? Like up in the Siberian area, Russia and stuff like that. Like he just wrote, this is Tartaria. It's really interesting. It's a cool map. And it says in big letters, Yobarite, right? So we already broke down that. These are the people who came from the land that had the bar or the pillars or the columns, right? They left it. So Yo refers to the goddess of wisdom, the bar, so the goddess of wisdom who is the bar, and then Ite just sort of means like those from, basically. I'm just going to make that more simple for you. And in his text that accompanied the maps, Ptolemy is very clear about that. It was only the late medieval version of 1001 Nights in the 14th or 15th century that romanticized Ubar and turned it into a city instead of a region, right? I don't believe that Ubar or Iram of the Pillars was a city, as in like a small gathering of people. You could see it as a city if you want to see that entire island continent as a city collectively, right? Just like Atlantis, right? Atlantis was said to have been huge, gigantic, way bigger than the Eye of the Sahara, okay? Like it was many countries wide. It was huge and gigantic, rather than a region or a people. By 2007, following further research and excavation, a study authored in part by JayDreamerZ could be summarized as follows. Now, here's some bullet points. As far as the legend of Ubar, which is another word for Iram of the Pillars, as far as the legend of Ubar was concerned, there was no evidence that the city had perished in a sandstorm. Now, I also want to talk about sandstorms. What happens whenever, when the world depressurizes, or when the world is introduced or reintroduced into an influx of electromagnetic energy in the form of either terrestrial beams that shoot up, or heavenly or cosmic snakes, or, plasma basically that snakes its way in like serpents and comes down. Both of those have the potential, and most likely would, lift dust and sand and debris up into the air just through their electromagnetic charge alone. And I've shared this many different times that there are people who have done studies on dust storms and dust devils and stuff like that, and they actually record the level of electricity, and they say it's not the wind. I mean, the wind is a contributing factor in lifting sand up into the air, but it is actually electricity. And I've shared this many different times where you can see that static electricity, you can perform this as a test yourself, right? If you can get enough static electricity in your body, you can put your hand right above some sand, and the sand will jump up into the air to try to meet that charge that is coming from your fingertips or whatnot. You can do it with balloons and stuff on your hair and stuff too. But electricity can pull the earth up into the sky, is the point that I want to make. All right, now it goes on. Much of the fortress had collapsed into a sinkhole. So this, just like Atlantis, had sank into the earth that hosted the well. Well, that's interesting too. There was a sinkhole that was the spot where there was a well. So at the very top of our world, where the garden is, every legendary garden, many of them, have this story about having a well, a wishing well, a magical well, a place where there is a hole that goes down into the earth that provides healing waters. Perhaps undermined by groundwater being taken to irrigate the surrounding oasis. Okay. Rather than being a city, interpretation of the evidence suggested that Ubar was more likely to have been a region, the land of the Yobarite, right? Identified by Ptolemy. The decline of the region was probably due to a reduction in the frankincense trade caused by the conversion of the Ram, or Ram-on, those of the Ram, right? Those from the beams. Roman Empire to Christianity, which did not require incense at the same time, in the same quantities. I'm sorry, let me start that over. Which did not require incense in the same quantities for its rituals. Also, it became difficult to find local labor to collect the resin. Climatic changes led to desiccation of the area, and sea transport became a more reliable way of transporting goods. Well, yeah, when the seas are introduced, that's going to be more reliable, because now you kind of have to, learn how to sail the oceans and stuff like that. We didn't always have oceans. It was more land, and it will return that way once more when the oceans are taken away. Now, it says in Al-Hadith, there are many hadiths about Iram, with one being the story of Abdullah bin Kalaba, who found Iram of the Pillars while searching for his lost camel. Check this out. I love these first-hand accounts. These are always amazing. So there's this guy, Abdullah bin Kalaba, which means Abdullah, the son of Kalaba, who found the legendary city. He found it, right? There's so many stories about people who have actually gone out and accidentally, typically, right? Some people were looking for it, but oftentimes people just stumbled upon it. This mystic magic island continent that typically had a huge mountain at its center that was magnetic in nature. And there's many different stories, and we covered a lot of those here on my channel too. So this guy found the Iram of the Pillars while searching for his lost camel. That lost camel part is really interesting too, because the word picture for the letter G, or the modern letter C, like I showed you on the map, how there's a G in the middle, that also means camel. The word picture was for a camel, which is something that you use to go on trips and travel with and stuff. The story has been rejected by some Islamic scholars who consider the story as a hadith. Who told the story was Jewish before he converted to Islam, and thus he was accused by some scholars of narrating the stories. So basically what they're saying is that although there may be a lot of truth to this story of somebody who had found this legendary city of Iram of the Pillars, they dismissed it because the person who had written this story, or who had provided the story, used to be Jewish. So now it's a big deal about, well, you're from a different religion, therefore all of what you say is just false, right? All right, let's continue on. Iram of the Pillars, a pre-human city? Now, fans of H.P. Lovecraft. If you don't know who H.P. Lovecraft is, he's probably most famous for having come up with his character, or his godlike character, named Cthulhu. Right, the Call of Cthulhu, which it's going to actually mention here in just a minute. But I want to sort of let you know who Cthulhu is. Cthulhu is this cosmic god that lives up in the sky. Sometimes he's pictured as living down at the bottom of the ocean as well. But Cthulhu is a personification by H.P. Lovecraft of these plasma tentacles that are seen as being sleeping and waiting for the world, or for its servants, which are just evil, to awaken it, right? And these plasma tentacles come down and is seen as this face up in the sky that has all these tentacles that come off of it, much like Medusa. Fans of H.P. Lovecraft remember Iram, the City of Pillars, from Lovecraft's The Nameless City in 1921, where the ancient Arabian city, today spelled Iram, is mentioned in connection with a fabulous race of lizard people. Wow. That's super interesting, right? And again, in The Call of Cthulhu in 1926, where it is a cult center for the Old Ones. Now, that place on the map where I showed you, right, in the middle of the world, this is the cult center, which is just short for culture. Okay, so this is a culture that thrived and was separate from the outside world because there was an electromagnetic barrier over this particular island, which was created by the anode and the cathode mountains, respectively. They shoot their own beams up too, and they create an electrical arc, or a Hyperborean electrical arc, that covers this entire island continent and sort of acts as a barrier, keeping people in and keeping people out. All right. A cult center for the Old Ones. It is also found in the Arabian Nights. The city is described in the Quran right here. And this is the same exact quote from the Quran, it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and read it anyways. Why not? Hast thou not considered how thy Lord dealt with Ad, the people of Iram, adorned with lofty buildings, the like whereof hath not been erected in the land, and with the Tamud, who hewed the rocks and the valley into houses, and with Pharaoh, the contriver of the stakes, who had behaved insolently in the earth, and multiplied corruption therein? Wherefore thy Lord poured on them various kinds of chastisement that was poured out from above, just like in the book of Revelation, where it talks about these bowls that are poured out, these different 7 bowls of wrath that are poured down onto the earth from above whenever the sky opens up. Now, later legends embellishing on this story suggest that Allah, now Allah, if you're not familiar with that, is the Islamic term or name for God. And I believe, based on my research so far, that the root of it is El, just like in Hebrew. It means mighty leader. And if you say that in sort of a childlike way, just like how we would say, instead of dad, we would say dada, because we give that last consonant a really hard sound, so it sounds like a doublet. Or mama, dada, al, Allah, etc., right? So it's another name for God. So Allah buried the city in the sands of the Arabian desert after a great noise from above was heard. a great noise from above was heard. I want to touch on that real quick. When the sky blows open and the world depressurizes, there will be a great noise. It will be the trumpet of God. There are many, many different trumpets that go off before that, but this is the final one. This is the one that harkens and signals the arrival of the beam that is about to follow up and, regenerate our world, as reported in a poetic fragment recorded in Arabian Nights. How this was remembered when the city all in and around it perished, I can't fathom to guess. Okay, let me translate this. They say how this story survived when there was such devastation and allegedly no survivors, it blows their mind. This also reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean. The first one, when Jack Sparrow is locked up in the prison and the other pirates are talking, or the other people, the prisoners are talking about, like, I heard that the Black Pearl doesn't take any survivors. And Jack Sparrow's like, well, where do the stories come from? Right? Because people always, they catastrophize this and they think that it's just unsurvivable. It's not, you're not able to survive it. But in reality, it is survivable. There are survivors and the stories are passed on, right? Which is good news for us. The poem in question was allegedly spoken by the dead king of the city and recorded by his son. I was amused, therefore, to read in Bob Curran's Lost Lands, Forgotten Realms, 2011, a supposedly non-fictional examination of lost civilizations. Oops, my bad. Where was I? Examinations of lost civilizations. The following passage about Iram and its alleged connection to the Arabian demons, the jinn, or the genies of Arabic lore. Some traditions say that Iram was built by the jinn themselves before the time of Adam and was later inhabited by men. This tradition stems from the name Iram of the Pillars, the ancient Arabic word for pillar corresponding to another meaning, namely old one. So now they're making the connection here to H.P. Lovecraft and his cosmic deities that he refers to as the old ones, or some people call them the ancient ones, right? These are the ones of old. These are, I wouldn't call them physical beings in the sense that we are physical beings and we have bodies with spirits inside of it. They were pure spirit. They were godlike. They were seen as being angelic or demonic, depending on, how favorable their energy was to humanity. The name, therefore, was a city of the old ones, that is, the jinn. Iram of 1,000 columns. Remember, I said I was going to bring this up, right? Now, remember, the word Iram itself, or Iram, however you'd like to pronounce it, starts with Aleph, right? It starts with typically Aleph, or the letter A, you could say. And that corresponds to the number 1,000. Iram of 1,000 columns. Very interesting. And it says, have you not considered? Now, I'm not going to read that one again because that's the exact same quote from the Quran. I'm pretty sure it's the only time that Iram of the Pillars is mentioned in the Quran, which is interesting because to me, if it's mentioned once like that and it's set and the narrator, the person who wrote that, is telling the reader, have you not considered? And it's only mentioned once, that implies to me that it was common knowledge at the time, that the writers had no need to go into it and explain it all because the entire world knew about this legendary garden paradise. They knew about these things, which is also reciprocated in the Bible when it talks about the Garden of Eden, right? It says that a garden was placed eastward in Eden. But if you do a translation of that word, eastward, it does not mean a cardinal direction. What it means is ancient. It means from of old. So a garden from of old was placed in Eden, right? So it's a legendary garden. It's a garden that everybody knew about. So they didn't have any need to go into great detail about these things, right? Those things that were common at the time, people didn't think that they were going to have to re-explain this to a future society that had forgotten all about it because they were writing to their own modern citizens or whatever. Iram of 1,000 pillars. A city, the like of which has never been built in the whole land, according to the Quran, is a lost city shrouded in mystery. According to Islamic lore, King Shaddad, the son of Ad, had the city built as an imitation of paradise on earth. Boom. The Garden of Eden, Hyperborea, the place of emergence for the Hopi and various other tribes that were wandering about trying to find their homeland. To compete with God and receive for this heavenly chastise. In some versions of the myth, Shaddad and his tribe of giants, or according to some other legends, with the help of a legion of demons, built Iram or Iram before the time of Adam, thus making it the oldest city on earth. This harkens back to the story of Solomon and Solomon building his temple. And he actually enlisted the help or forced demonic entities, which is just energetic apparitions, to help him build it. Now, energy, like I said, can build things on the earth. It can terraform. Electricity can terraform our world. It can, if it's powerful enough, it can lift up entire regions of mud and sand and debris up into the sky and then hits that charge and petrifies it, creating buildings and structures that we call mountains and towers and whatnot, castles and stuff. Now, whew, man, every time I cough or sneeze, it tears me apart because I think my rib is fractured right now. But we can talk about that when we're done. All right. The exact location of Iram is somewhere lost in the empty quarter, the desert of Rub al-Khali, the southern Arabia, where only by chance can Iram be found by the uninitiated. Iram, so I'm going to tell you, let me explain what that means. Okay. Only by chance can it be found by the uninitiated. That means if you have no idea where it is, if you don't study Hyperborea, if you don't study the Garden of Eden, if you don't study the Fountain of Youth and learn these legends and gain the clues that have been passed down to us in the form of breadcrumbs, you're not going to have any idea where this place is located. Exactly like the various families of nobility around the world who have went on various excavations and explorations and sent their people all the way around the world to try to find the Garden of Eden, to try to find the Fountain of Youth once more. They're lost. They can't do it because the directions have shifted. The seasons have shifted. Everything in this world changes after each apocalyptic cycle, throwing everybody into confusion and chaos. And they forget where they came from after they start wandering around and they don't recognize their landmarks any longer. Iram also plays an important role in the Necronomicon mythos. The fabulous author of Al-Azif, the mad poet of Sanaa Abdul al-Hazred, was credited by Lovecraft for visiting Iram and penetrating its hidden vaults. Now that's interesting too, to penetrate the hidden vaults. Iram of the Pillars, just like so many other mythic and legendary cities or lost continents or sunken continents, etc., they were said to contain treasures unheard of, treasures untold, treasures unimaginable in our world today. And I believe that the reason for that is that there is a transmuting, thank you for everybody who reminded me of that word last time, a transmutation of the elements because of such a strong electrical force that comes in and rearranges the chemicals at a molecular level and turns different substances into newer and other substances, right? And it's able to transmute things into gold and precious gems and rubies. For example, look at a petrified tree, right? It's rock. It's now filled with precious stones. If you take a look inside of a petrified tree, you'll see that it just changes into precious stones. And it's done through electricity, I believe. All right, continuing on. It says, Iram Zat al-Imad, the Iram of the Pillars, the great city. I have spent 10 years in the heart of that Roba al-Khalieh, the empty space, the great southern desert colored Dama, crimson. A crimson desert, a red desert, that red dust, that red sand that kicks up. The reason that the sand and the dust and the color of the earth sort of becomes red, as well as the sky and so many other things too, or sort of a dusty orangey red color too, is because all of that ionized oxygen that comes up out of the earth, it oxidizes everything that it touches. It causes our world to become very rusty, basically. So it has a rusty color, and that's why you see that sort of a color that they use in those filters on post-apocalyptic movies. All right, continuing on. And I have seen the fabulous many pillars of Iram, and I have been called Majnun, mad and possessed of the jinn, right? So here's something that happens when you get closer and closer to these places of power where these pillars or these bars or these columns shoot up out of the world. They amplify your spirit energy. You could call it your auras, your chakras, all of the above. There's your spirit, your soul, etc. becomes amplified, which is why you become invigorated, vitalized, and revitalized with life, right? Re-energized. All right, so continuing on. Many are the strange and unbelievable. Actually, I want to touch on that. So if your spirit, if your energy is amplified by the earth energy that comes up from above, right, it tends to have more positive attributes. If your spirit is amplified by the energy that comes down from above, then you are what I call plasma possessed and become murderous, and it's not fun. But those are the worshippers of Cthulhu. That's the cult of Cthulhu. Those are the people who have that red plasma energy signature. I'm just cartoonifying that myself right now through my own perception filter, okay? But it's basically red versus blue. All right. Many are the strange and unbelievable marvels. Remember, that word marvel, the root of that is maru. The letter V was actually the letter U or a Vav in ancient times. Okay, so it's actually Maru or Meru, Mount Meru, right? Mount Meru. And Meru El just means mighty ones of the mountain. Okay, this harkens back to like Olympus, Mount Sinai, etc. Many are the strange and unbelievable marvels that may be seen there. Alas, for the earth has swallowed up the city of pillars. No more do the caravans of frankincense pass by. Interesting too, right? They keep mentioning frankincense, and it reminds me of the birth of Jesus in the Bible. They talk about how the wise men followed a light and they came to the place or the birthplace of the Savior, and they presented frankincense and myrrh and gold, right? Many have called it, and these places of power, they smell delicious. Okay, this is another thing. I'm just remembering so many of my own studies. But when these people go to like the Garden of Eden or other places of power, which are emergence places for that inner earth or terrestrial energy, it smells delicious. It smells so good. You're in. We broke down this. I do truth in movies on my channel, and we did this movie Troll. And in the movie Troll, they called it hypernature. Right? It's the smell of amplified natural scent that is just pleasing. Like after a huge rainstorm, you know, that really good rain smell that it's similar to that basically. Electricity helps out with that too. Now, many have called it a town of great wickedness, but do they dare comprehend the fabulous? Right? There's always two sides to every story. There's always two sides to energy as well. Iram was an earthly paradise to the initiated. Towers rising high, the great octagonal fort, alas, no more. And there were places here of hidden knowledge and of power. Some say it was built by giants, some by the tribe of Ad. But Iram was here before men, and though swallowed, she will protect her secrets from the profane. Right? This is the great hush hush. This is the great secret that they don't want to tell the bad people of the world, because if you send a bunch of bad people to the most powerful energetic source in the world, that gives the potential for bad news for the rest of us, right? There seems to be this sort of fight for Mount Meru, this fight for Eden, this fight between those who have a remnant or signature of the tree of life within us, and those who are the servants of Cthulhu, right? Fighting over the most powerful place of power in the world, which is the Garden of Eden, Hyperborea, the tree of life, etc., right? Whoever controls that area seems to be able to control the rest of the world, energetically speaking, and they become what's known as the hidden hand. Now, releasing them to the knowing, for there are many levels of existence for Iram, many levels of reality. So, Iram of the old ones still exists in some form. And is this And is not this great desert, this empty quarter, connected to the void? Ah, now we have a reference to the void, also known, biblically speaking, as the bottomless pit, right? There's a bottomless pit. There's a huge inner earth cavernous entrance. I like to call it the Cave of Saviors, or the Cave of Wonders, the Cave of Treasures, right? But there's this huge pit that goes down into the earth. It's a huge cave, and it is also known as the void, right? Also, you could also look at the hole in the sky as being a type of void as well. So they're both right above each other. They're in the same location. Now, cannot a Mukaribun interact with its unseen denizens in the Crimson Desert? The tribe of Ad, mentioned in the Quran, bears a close resemblance to the biblical Nephilim, which were also believed to be a race of giants, and credited for building the city of Enoch. In some other traditions, it was Cain. Cain, another way of saying Cain is Khan, which essentially translates into a speaker of God, or those who are imbued with power by God, or from above, or from the earth herself, right? And they become priests. So that's what Khan, Cain, Kohen, and those types of words mean. The murderer of his brother Abel, to found the great city, and this is found in Genesis, which is somehow identified with Baalbek, Heliopolis, or the city of the sun, in what is today's Lebanon. I have different ideas about its location, right? I'm not too sure that it's the modern day Lebanon or whatnot, but this is the author speaking. And it goes on. In one of the earliest Arabic accounts of Iram, quoted by Mas'udi in the Meadows of Gold, another striking identification of Iram is proposed with the city of Damascus in Syria, and he goes on to quote, "Such was the reign of Jerun, the son of Sahad, the son of Ad, who first settled in the country of Damas, where he had his capital. There he gathered a great many pillars of marble, white and colored, and had considerable construction built, which gave the name of Iram of Pillars. Many historians give different opinions on the account of Iram and its location, but I believe to this day, in the year 332 of Egira, its ruins survive in what is now one of the markets of Damas, close to the door of the mosque cathedral called Jerun, or the Gate of Jerun." Now we pick back up. He says, another interesting reference to Iram in the work of Mas'udi appears in the chapter describing the foundation of Alexandria by Alexander the Great. Now, for me, some people might believe that Alexander the Great was a real human that lived and led everybody and stuff, and that very well might be, right? Just like many other historic figures that could or may not be real, right? Like King Arthur is a great example too. And King Arthur, there's many legends and stories that talk about how King Arthur also went beyond the northern winds and found Hyperborea, or found the Garden of Eden. And he went and he set up an entire kingdom there. This is also like the story of Prester John and many others. According to Mas'udi, when Alexander reached the site of what was to become the capital of his new empire, he found the place marked by a great many ruins, in the middle of which stood a column of stupendous size, bearing an ancient inscription. Now, I want to comment on that real quick, okay? So I've come across many of these legends and myths, the world across and across time, that talk about how there are these pillars. There's these huge pillars, the pillars of Hercules and various other types like that. And oftentimes they talk about how there are these inscriptions, these writings that are on these pillars themselves. Now, keep in mind, sometimes the pillars that they refer to are the mountains, or the earth that has been pulled up by that electrical charge, how we talked about, right? Creating a steep mountain, a tower, essentially, in some places. In other places, it just looks like a volcano, right? And it becomes more cone-shaped or pyramidal in structure, right? But they have this writing on them. One reference to this writing on these pillars or on these mountains or rock is obviously there's Mount Sinai, there's Moses and the 10 Commandments or the tablets that were given to him. There are the emerald tablets, right? Also, there's many different references to this. And I'm not entirely sure. I kind of have a theory that maybe it wasn't physical writing. It could be physical writing, but maybe it's an energetic charge, right? And when they touch it, it transfers information to them through telepathy, because there's an increased electromagnetic force in our world, and touching an object that is imbued with power, or a relic basically, they're able to receive divine revelation, or what they would call divine revelation. Where were we here? Let's see. Stupendous size, bearing an ancient inscription in Mozned characters, that is to say, in the ancient writing of Himyar and the kings of Ad. Now the inscription read this: I, Shaddad, son of Od, son of Shaddad, son of Od, whose arms have embraced the earth. I had large columns, cut from the mountains and quarries. I built Iram of the pillars, a city the like of which was never seen. And after that, I decided to build a city similar to Iram, where I gathered all of the noblest and fairest of men. This harkens back to Mount Olympus, right? The gathering place of the mighty ones and the powerful ones and the heroes and the gods and stuff. Are you guys having a good time in the chat? I hope you guys are having a good time. Wow, we got over 400 people watching. That's awesome. I think that might be a record. Well, I'm honored. Thank you. Let's continue on. The very best of all nations and tribes, they were gathered together at these pillars, these mountains, because this place was protected by fate from all disasters and calamities which befell the earth. So if this harkens back to this place on the map that we've talked about in the middle of the world right here, right? This place is energetically protected from the apocalypse and many other things. I mean, it's not a guarantee that you won't die or anything. However, there seems to be good indication that you might not die, because there's so much charge, energetic charge, that it becomes difficult for beings to actually die in these places, right? So, excuse me. He says, the very best of all nations and tribes, because this place was protected by fate from all disasters and calamities which befell the earth. So I want to comment once more, right? This reminds me of, in Norse mythology, they talk about how during Ragnarok, the survivors, the human survivors, affectionately known as, man, I just totally forgot their names. Leif and Leifthrazir, right? Boy and a girl. They go into the trunk of Yggdrasil, or the world tree. So they go to the Axis Mundi, they go to the center of the world, right here in this place right here. They go all the way to the middle. They go on an epic quest. They have an exodus, you could say, right? When the world's distracted by all of the increased energy and exponentially increased entropy, right? There's wars and all this stuff that are happening. The whole world's distracted, and they make a journey. They make a quest all the way to the center of the world, to Yggdrasil, to the world tree, and they hide in the trunk in a place called Hodmimi's Holt, which is a place where one of the wisest, if not the wisest, of the Norse gods lived, and they're protected from calamity, they're protected from destruction and death, and they become survivors. And this is what this reminds me of too. I'll read it again. The very best. Hold on, let me go back just a bit. All right, so large columns cut from the mountains and quarries. I built Iram of the pillars, a city the like of which has never been seen. And after that, I decided to build a city similar to Iram, where I gathered the noblest and the fairest of men, the very best of all nations and tribes. You see, there is a signal that is put out. You can sense it now. Some of you can sense it, okay? If you have a compass, you can see that your compass senses it because it's electromagnetic in nature. Your compass will literally point you in the direction of this place, okay? Until you get really close, then your compass will start spinning around, because then it goes... it starts to follow like the currents and eddies and stuff like that. But people hear a calling. Some of us, we have a like attracts like, right? So we hear a calling. Some of us hear a calling, and we are called to go to a place of safety to escape apocalyptic events, world wars, and things like that. And we go down into Hodmimi's Holt. We go down into the Tree of Life. We take refuge in the center of the world, or the place of emergence, which is what it will become when we come back out, right? The very best of all nations and tribes. I also want to say this too. We're not the only ones. Okay, humans are not the only ones who will hear this type of a calling, right? It's an electromagnetic signature that we pick up on and we follow it, just like animals, right? Just like animals, birds and dolphins and all kinds of animals, they migrate and they follow the electromagnetic currents of the world. The world itself, the earth itself, directs them. So, just like in the Bible, right? It talks about in the Garden of Eden, all of the animals came to this place where Adam lived in the Garden of Eden in the middle of the world, and they all migrated. They all came to him. How can all of the animals in the world come to one place at the same time? Well, guess what? It happened again later on when Noah was building the ark. And they knew that there was going to be a crisis, and all of the animals in the entire world, or many of them, right? They all flocked. They all came to a specific place because they felt it. They sensed it. It's an increased electrical or electromagnetic field, and it sends out a frequency that if you're tuned into it, you hear the calling. You just know what's going on. You get divine revelation, basically. Or you could call it that, you know. It's just natural revelation, really. Because this place was protected by fate from all disasters and calamities which befell the earth. But in this grand endeavor, I was stopped, and thus was my project abandoned. It was not in front of a mighty king or his innumerable legions that I surrendered, but to death, only because the end of my days had come by the mercy of God. What do you think of that story? It's pretty good, right? Again, according to Mas'udi, the sons of Ad, also called Adites or Adites, were the first to rule over the land. And it goes on to quote, "The great empire of the Adites was the first to ever be founded on earth. After that, the vengeance of God had exterminated all of the infidels by the means of the great flood of Noah," which we just made reference to. The Adites were, as we said, a race of giants endowed with an unnaturally long life, which was proportional to their height, right? So this is also something that you can expect to reoccur. Right now, we are all shrinking collectively, okay? Some people might get, kind of tall and join the NBA or whatever, but everybody is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and that is a prophecy in different cultures and religions as well. That's how you can tell if you pick up on the omens and the signs of and the signals of Mother Earth. You can just watch and see that things are changing, things are getting smaller, things are shrinking, right? And after energy is reintroduced into this world, everything is going to start growing back to gigantic sizes. Except for those of you who've already gone through puberty and stuff, you might actually stay small, but your children will grow to become titans and giants. All right, so it continues on saying the ancestral territory of Ad was, according to the Masudi, bordering Yemen and compromising the land of Sohar, or Oman, until the Hadramut. Shaddad, son of Ad, traveled the world, waged war against India and the West, and built Iram of the Pillars in a time before the dispersion of people and languages which followed the episode of the Tower of Babel. So before the Tower of Babel fell, you had these pillars. You had Iram of the Pillars and all of this stuff that happened because the Tower of Babel itself is a pillar. It's a type of pillar or beam that shoots up into the sky that comes out of a high and lofty cliff-like mountain, which is affectionately called Mount Meru, right? And whenever they go through their apocalyptic cycle, that pillar retracts and that tower falls and that energy goes away. And so do all of its benefits like telepathy, the worldwide language. So now people had to start using guttural utterances, which is what I call it. They had to make up signals with one another. They had to invent languages, and those languages differed with dialect and people spreading around and going to different places and stuff. And this gives rise to the Tower of Babel story. The idea of a mythical city of inexhaustible riches and ruined splendors, somehow lost amidst the sands, also caught the imagination of the author of the Arabian Nights, or the Book of the 1001 Nights, which situates Iram in the deserts of Yemen. According to the story told in the Arabian Nights of the fate of the many-columned Iram, the city was built by King Shaddad as an imitation of the earthly paradise, and was truly the most splendid and magnificent city ever seen on earth. This is also referenced in much of your pop culture and your fiction and sci-fi and stuff, like Oz, like the land of Oz, right? Actually, if you take a look at the map of Oz, it looks exactly like this. Okay, like it's very, very similar to this. It's split into 4. It's got like, you know, the Emerald City in the middle or whatever. It's exactly like that. Hold on, let me get some water. Sorry. Okay, so according to legend, it took 20 years to gather the gold, silver, and the precious stones necessary for the construction, and another 30 just to complete the walls. Over 20 years, that's 50 years total, okay? So 20 years and 30 years equals 50 years, which just so happens to coincide with the number of the Jubilee, which was typically 50 years. Other 20 years were spent for building all of the great palaces and temples, and a further 20 years to complete the preparations, furnishings, and the decorations. When eventually Shaddad was about to enter his new splendid capital with all of his retinue, God sent a sandstorm, or a thunderstorm, according to other versions. I'm going to time out on this real quick. Okay, I want to jump into this. The sandstorm, sometimes referred to as a thunderstorm, this is the plasma apocalypse, right? This is whenever the beams shoot up from inside of the earth and they take with them pieces of the earth up into the sky in the form of sand and mud and debris, which can petrify and even add to the mountains that are getting steeper and steeper and end up crumbling in places and stuff like that, right? Like Mount Meru and other places. This is also the origin of the Sandman. Okay, so when we go through this worldwide depressurization, or those beams come up and stuff, a lot of people pass out and they fall asleep. And when they wake up, all that dust has spread around the world and stuff, and they wake up with dirt and sand in their eyes and stuff, and they have to like wipe it out and stuff. And a lot of times their memories are wiped. They don't remember anything or whatever. And all they see is this stick figure like beam up in the sky. And they say that must be the man who brought all this sand into the world, right? And they call that the Sandman or whatever. All right, so God sent a sandstorm, or a thunderstorm, according to other versions, so violent that of this king and all of his tribe was never heard from again a single word. It is said, however, that this city still exists in the solitudes of Arabia or Arabia. Curiously enough, a city or land by the name of Iram is indeed mentioned in ancient writings, most notably in clay tablets found in the ancient library of Ebla and in the Egyptian texts dating to the reign of Seti I. It is not clear whether the Egyptian Iram appearing in some New Kingdom texts was one and the same with the Old Kingdom land of Yam, or the Canaanite Leviathan. There are several hypotheses concerning the location of the Egyptian Iram, the most likely being the upper Nubian Valley. There is, however, research suggesting that Iram may have been a much more distant land, like Hyperborea. Possibly located in what is today's Ethiopia. Now, I'm going to have to do a whole video covering this, but I believe, I have a theory that these lands up here were actually, they originally shared many of the place names that are actually surrounding them, because these people took their original place names like Egypt and Greece and Ethiopia and stuff. They left those places and they just superimposed those names onto the new lands that they settled, right? All right, good. Possibly located in what is today Ethiopia. which was for a period subject to South Arabian rule from the Yemenite kingdom of Marib or Sheba. Still, it's doubtful whether the Egyptian Iram was the same as the many-columned Iram of Arabian legends and mysticism. I say there's a good case to be made for that. Also, one clay tablet found in the library of Ebla dating to 2300 BC mentioned diplomatic and commercial intercourse with the people of Iram. Ah, so now we've got trade going on, right? So this harkens back to Mercury and the merchants and the mercs and stuff like that, right? Even though, also in this case, the identification with Iram is doubtful. In the early 1980s, researchers looking for ancient settlements along the frankincense route in southern Arabia found a promising location close to a water well called Ash Shishar. It's interesting. I'm going to have to break that one down sometime. Typically, ash actually refers to like fire. That's why we have ash that comes from stuff that burns. In a site which had been previously identified in the 16th century fort. The expedition team included adventurer Ranulf Fiennes, archaeologist Juris Zarins, filmmaker Nicholas Clapp, and lawyer George Hedges. The team scouted the area on several trips, uncovering remains of an earlier settlement which they believed could have served as an outpost on the trade route to Iram. About 300 to 500 AD, the fort collapsed, probably because of a cave-in in the underground water source which had assured its survival in the harsh desert climate for many centuries. Later, the site came to be identified with Ubar, mentioned by Ptolemy in his work Geography. There is, however, no proof that the site was ever more than an isolated water hole that was guarded by a relatively small fort. This is the opinion of the author. There is even doubt this remote outpost could be the same as the trading post called Omanum Emporium in Ptolemy's Geography. Excuse me. And believed to be one of the most important stations for the production of oliban or frankincense. There's that frankincense connection again. As of today, no further clue has been found as to the location of Iram, which has thus come to be designated as the real Atlantis of the Sands. And it says the desert covers the ruins of the ancient city of Dongola in Sudan, perhaps the fate similar to that of Iram. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read this addendum as well. Addendum just means something that is added on at the end. According to esoteric tradition, some currents of Islamic Sufism, Iram existed in this world as well as on a separate level of existence. So that is a Mount Meru direct correlation, right? Mount Meru, Mount Olympus, all these holy and sacred mountains, they were all said to basically combine or touch the heavens and the earth, both at the same time, and inside of the earth as well, that they existed on all three realms, sometimes more than that too, because that is the place of power. That's where all of that energy goes all the way up, and the tree of life grows as a seed from within the earth, reaching all the way up and branching up to the sky and into the heavens. So it exists on different realms or planes of existence, you could say. In this case, Iram is the gateway to the void, right? Like we talked about earlier, symbolized in the myth by the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. That is to annihilation of the self as a fundamental step towards initiation, which can only be entered while in an alternate state of consciousness. I'm going to interpret that for you, okay? So basically, whenever you go to these places, your energy becomes amplified, like I talked about, and you become more connected to the energetic field that exists nearby and with the earth itself, or with the cosmos itself. Depends on which energy you are charged by. But what that means for you and for me, as individuals, is we lose a part of what we would call our ego, okay? Our part of us that is cut off right now in this current paradigm in this world that we live in now, we are cut off from those other sources of energy. We don't recognize them. We don't even teach people that they exist anymore. So whenever our souls, our energy becomes amplified by this energetic amplification, your mind becomes filled with information. I'm trying to describe it in words, but it's not easy to do. You have revelation upon revelation. It's best described. You know what? It's best described in 1 Corinthians 13. So I'm actually going to pull that up. 1 Corinthians 13. I want to read this to you because it's actually really important. I'm just going to go with the NIV version. That's fine. Let me shrink this down a bit here. This is really important. This actually makes reference to this whole revelation whenever your spirit becomes amplified by power, energetic power, right? And it talks about how we live now in a time where we have very little information, right? We have very little connection to the world and to other spirits and stuff like that. So in this part right here, excuse me. All right, so it says right here, we know in part, so we have partial knowledge, and we prophesy in part, and we speak in part, right? But when completeness comes, or in some versions it will say when that which is perfect has come, what is in part, or what is imperfect, will disappear. When I was a child, like we are today, we're basically all children, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child, and I reasoned as a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now, this is a reference to like our modern age. Now we see only a reflection, like in a mirror. And in some versions, I actually don't even really like this version, but it says, typically it will say like, for now we see as if we're looking in a dimly lit mirror, right? Like in a room that is dark, but we're trying to make out things that are in the mirror, right? But then it goes on and it says, when that which is perfect has come, or that godlike energy or that terrestrial energetic flux comes into our world and revitalizes everything, then we shall see face to face. We shall have revelations, basically. Now I know in part. I only know partially. But then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known, right? So it's telepathy. People will know each other. You won't be able to keep secrets from people, or I should say it will be very difficult to keep secrets or whatever, because there will be such a high energetic charge in the world that you'll be able to tap into what, Edgar Cayce called the Akashic records, or the information of the world, the song of the world. Hey, Nick McGinnis, welcome. Good to see you, Nick. All right, let's continue on and finish this up. It says that is to annihilation of the self, like we just talked about, as a fundamental step towards initiation, or being born again, or having a new revelation and a new outlook and a new perspective because you have new knowledge, right? Which can only be entered while in an alternate state of consciousness. That reminds me of a movie called Altered States, which is pretty good too. You should check it out. To the Makaribun Rub al-Khali is thus the secret door to the void in Arab magical traditions, and the exact Arab equivalent to Dahat in the Kabbalah. Also, another possible translation for Iram of the Pillars is Iram of the Old Ones, which was mentioned earlier, which is remarkably similar to Lovecraft's Old Ones. Was Lovecraft somehow aware of ancient Arabic magical traditions? That's possible that he was conscious of it, but just like we read in that biblical quote, we know in part, right? So sometimes we tap into these things naturally or accidentally, right? And I have found that the more that we use or balance the left side of the brain with the right side of the brain, being fact and logic and stuff with reasoning and creativity and picture form and imagination, right? The easier it is to receive those types of revelations. Piscean Errant, hey, that was cool. Thank you. He says, I love the show, blowing minds realm wide. How cool. All right. We're almost done here. I think we might be done, actually. I think that was the end. Yeah, that was it. Wow, that was good timing, Piscean Errant. So check this out. We have now, I want to thank everybody for watching, okay? I'm not done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close out all of these tabs that I have open. And I'm actually going to just jump into the chat. I'm going to put your comments on the screen. I'll put Piscean Errants up there first because I super appreciate the support. And let's see. Let me go ahead and get rid of this little screen capture here, and we'll put this back up. Iram of the Pillars. Thanks again, Piscean Errant. Super appreciate you. 1111. I like it. Very nice. Let me go ahead and close these out. If you have a question for me, okay, not that I have all of the answers or anything, but I'll respond. Feel free to type in J-A-Y in the chat, or at JayDreamerZ, and it'll highlight in the chat on my side, just like Alberta65H just did. She said, greetings, Jay, because you typed in J, it highlights on my screen here at home, and it's easier for me to see your comments, right? So I'm happy to spend a little bit of time in the chat. Also, at this point in time, I would, let's see, I'd like to sort of give a plug. I have been invited to something quite interesting and fun. I don't know if you guys have heard of like JayDreamerZ. There's a channel called JayDreamerZ. Awesome channel, great content. And there's many other channels too, but he's one of the people who is hosting something that is called the True Earth Equinox Summit. And I have been cordially invited to be a speaker at this online summit. It's not a summit or a meeting that you have to actually go to, so you don't need to buy a plane ticket or drive anywhere. It's all going to be online. They're going to have an entire host of various popular speakers, from YouTubers to like independent thinkers and stuff. For example, I think I'm looking at last year's right now. I can't tell. I'm still doing a lot more research. My mind's blown that I was even invited. So I'm super honored. So big shout out to him and the rest of the crew. Thank you so much. I'm still learning everybody's names too. But just for example, I think this is last year's. It could be this year's. I can't remember. Oh, here we go. This is speakers for this year so far. It looks like, I'm just going to give shout outs to all these people, but Zach Zabala, Iru Lenducci, Crow 777, Jason Lindgren, Dustin Nemos, Melodome, Caleb and Derek, Brian Young, Max Freeman, and they're going to have like some comedians and stuff. Jaren's going to be there. Austin Whitsitt will be there. He's also somebody that's been talking to me and invited me. So this is something that if you would like to attend, you'll have to buy tickets for and stuff. And this coming week, I'm going to be putting together information that I can share with all of you, so that if you'd like to come to this summit, you can. Last year they had a whole host of really interesting people that, man, it's just an honor for me to be a part of it. But I'm going to be selling tickets. There's different prices for like VIP and stuff. They're going to make it available so that you can, depending on which tickets you buy, you can actually like, there's going to be like a video panel and you can ask any of us questions, just have like some personal time with us and stuff. I'm going to be giving a presentation. I will be posting all of the information for it. I just want to give you guys a heads up right now because I'm excited about it. Okay, it's an honor. It's really awesome. But keep a lookout in my community section. Okay, and I might even make a video about it. I'm pretty sure I will. But I'm going to gather all the information for the dates and the times and how you can participate if you would like to, and where you can buy tickets and stuff. And keep an eye out for that. I'm super excited about it. All right, let me jump into the chat. Let's hang out for a bit here. So I'm just gonna scroll up a little bit. Sorry if I missed your comments. I'm starting with Kat Van Du, who says, "Thank you for another terrific presentation. You're super welcome." Sage helping out in the chat. I appreciate you, Sage. She's just letting everybody know to type in my name there. KLC Inspired says, JayDreamerZ, try laying flat on your back and ice. Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. On and off for 10 minutes. Okay, so he's referring to, some of you know this. I cracked my rib. I don't know if it's cracked or bruised, but I feel like it's cracked. I was out mountain biking with my son, and I was kind of like, I was showing off a little bit. I actually recorded it in super slow motion, but I ate it so bad. I ate it so bad. I knocked the wind out of me. Man, I couldn't breathe. When I cough, it hurts. When I sneeze, I'm scared. Feels like my ribs are gonna explode or something. So thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Dragon Sage says, great presentation, Jay. Thank you. Ginger Humphrey says, awesome show. Right on. I appreciate you. Piscean Errant, hey, good to see you again. Thanks for being a member and supporting me through the membership. I super appreciate it. By the way, if you become a member, you get like, cool little benefits like little membership badges and special channel emojis. And also access to various members only videos that I have that are all archived from the past, and certain segments that I do that I will make them members only videos just to show my appreciation for people who support my work. Let's see, we got Sage who says spell it. Okay, IT. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's see. Effed Up World says, great info. Thank you. I appreciate you. Divinely Devin 777 says, oh, that rhymes. That's cool. Divinely Devin 777. I like that. JayDreamerZ, or anyone who's interested, do check out the Leviathan remains that I found in Google Earth. Right on. Okay, interesting. We got Sarah Breslin who says, JayDreamerZ, we saw the last one. It was so good. It blew my mind. I'm honored. I love what I do. It's so fun. It's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work, but God, it's worth it. It's so great. Plus I miss hanging out with all you guys. Sojo, my ribs, they feel a little bit better today. I can cough without too much pain. If I can't lift things up super great right now, there's certain ways I can't really move and stuff. Who else we got? We got L4YL4 says, much love and gratitude. Thank you. Much love right back to you. Good vibes. El Salvador says, JayDreamerZ, I wondered what the difference technical between summer or winter solstice plasma event are, or maybe two. Always depends on what vibration you have, which experience, and what your insight. Okay, cool. I'm gonna give you the short version. This person is asking about the two different apocalyptic cycles that we go through, one by fire, one by water. We already went through the water one because it's evident by our ocean. Okay, that's the flood. It's still here. Okay, and that one I believe happens during the winter solstice. And I've gone over like the whys and the hows of all of that. The next one should be the summer solstice. Okay, so during the time of the summer solstice, which is actually coming right up. So these are the times of preparation. This is why all of our major holidays are centered around the winter and the summer solstices, right? And those also, keep in mind, flip and they switch during each apocalyptic cycle. Our seasons change. But what you're looking for is you need to track the heavens. You have to track the sun, mainly will be a huge indicator. If it's the summer solstice one, it will be apocalypse by plasma, fire from above, and specifically the sun itself will get so hot that it will begin to burn the earth and scorch the earth as it spirals in back towards the North Pole, just like the electromagnetic field is doing right now. Just like the magnetism of our world is spiraling back towards the North Pole right now. Let's see. We got Sage is super helpful. I totally agree with you. Who else we got? Cake Town. Good to see you. Cake Town says, get well soon. Thank you. I appreciate you and your support. Thank you very much. Try a chiropractor. I'm super good. No, I'm good. I'm just going to heal. I appreciate it though. Joe Cool says, Jay, question for mods by mods. Is it okay for viewers to chat about religion and biblical references during these live chats as long as it's not in a disrespectful manner? I'm going to say yes, right? The key thing is just be kind. It's really that simple, right? Be kind, be considerate, be thoughtful, think about other people, try to stay away from absolutes, try to stay away from telling people what to think or what to do, and try, and if you're a mod, lead by example. Because I promise you, I've seen so many mods, this is what I try to do, right? I try to rework my faults and to do things and speak in a better manner so that the mods will reciprocate, and then the mods start doing that, and then when they just start doing that, the viewers start doing that, and the subscribers and stuff, right? So it all starts with us, right? Treat people the way you'd like to be treated. Use your best judgment, right? I mean, obviously if somebody's just going left and being crazy and saying crazy stuff, block them, ban them, whatever, right? Get them out of here. Take the trash out. But if you can tell that people just don't understand, right? Lead by example. Be kind, throw out some subtle hints. If the energy is bad enough, get rid of them. It's totally fine. But use your best judgment. You know what I mean? I talk about religion all of the time. Think about the way that I'm talking about it, right? I try to be non-partial. I try not to use absolute statements. I try not to tell people like, this is the way that it is. Although sometimes I mess up and I do say stuff like that because it's easier, right? Right? Good question, Joe. I hope I helped to answer that. And because you said that, I'm making a mental note right now to do a special mods and members only live stream so that maybe we can talk about the, more expectations for mods going forward. You guys have been doing a great job. I'm so proud of the Good Vibe Tribe. I'm so proud of everybody in the chat and all the comments and everything. I've actually had people that I know in real life like, wow, these comments are amazing, man. Like these people are so positively charged and thoughtful and intelligent. So I'm really honored to know all of you. Let's see. Sounds like they're bruised. It could be bruised. I don't know. They hurt. Thanks, Sage. I super appreciate you. She says to heal fast. We got Raven Fox, who says good vibes to you, Raven Fox, and to all 400 people who are watching right now. Becca Davis says thanks for all you do. I appreciate you too. Thank you for your support. Oh my God, that just put gas in my tank. So thank you. Like when I get donations and stuff, I like to remind people, one, I'm humbled. I appreciate it. And I'm so thankful because you guys make it so that I can have nice things. Like I went to a restaurant this morning and I had breakfast at a restaurant instead of having to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like that's because of you. So thank you. To all of you who are donating through PayPal, I get all of your messages. Just so you know, if you ever want to send me like a little personal message, you can send a little PayPal and you can actually write to me. And I think it lets you talk for like a paragraph or something, but I read all of your messages and I'm just happy. I guess that's what I'm saying. Chrissy Briggs, been a member for 4 months. Good job. Welcome to the Good Vibe Tribe. And welcome. Is that your eyeball? Well, welcome. And it's awesome to have you. Dido says, Jay, what do you think about Pitch Lakes in reference to Bluebeam's exit? I'm not sure what Pitch Lakes are. I'm super sorry about that. What else we got? Scoop-a-doo. We got the Masters Champ says, Jay, was that the hand of an angel? Oh, you're talking about that star that passed the hand that passed in front of the star? I have no idea. Whatever it is, it's amazing, right? I've heard some people say like, oh, it's a trick with the telescope and they just put their hand in front of the telescope or whatever. I don't know. I don't feel like that's what it is, just because the hand seemed to affect the entire atmosphere or the fluid that is around that star. You know what I mean? You can see it like water. But it could be. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but to me, it's an omen and a sign, and that's how I'm taking it. We got Droopy Finding Reality. Hey, thanks for being a member. Thanks for your support. I super appreciate you. And to all you people who are buying memberships and donating memberships to the people in the chat. Wow. What a cool gift. Thank you. Let's see. We got Droopy who says, your channel helped me to open my eyes. I couldn't thank you enough, brother. You're very welcome. And I'm proud of you for being willing to open your eyes. I'm not opening anybody's eyes. You're opening your own eyes. You know what I mean? I'm just walking my path and I'm just letting my light shine. That's all. If I let my light shine bright enough, I don't need to go walking around shining it onto other people's paths or anything. I'm just going to follow my path, and whoever's in proximity to me or to any of us who are letting our lights shine, we will naturally illuminate the paths of others so that they can get a little taste of what it's like. And then naturally their own inner light will start to shine because they will desire more. Let's see. We got Bonnie Gretorix who says, Jay, are you friends with Ryder Lee at Raising Giants? No, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard of that person. Sherry, I totally missed you, Sherry. Sorry. Sherry 333 says, what happens to the whales and dolphins if oceans disappear? Good question. I like it. They get sucked up into the sky. They return to space where they probably came from. So that's my thoughts on that. I have done some videos. If you go through my playlists and stuff, right? I've talked about elephants and dolphins and some other animals and stuff, and how they may actually be ancestors of ancient phantazoids that floated down from the heavens or whatever, right? So yeah, they'll just like, what's that movie where the dolphins at the end, they say goodbye and thanks for all the fish? The Hitchhiker's Guide, right? Yeah, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. At the end, all the dolphins get sucked back up into space. It's exactly like that, basically. You know, some might stay, some might make it. There's always a remnant, but many of them are going to wish us a fond farewell. Anthony Hasty says, Jay, you should do a breakdown of the show The Golden Horde on Prime. It's about ancient Russia under Tartar rule. That's interesting. I do have Amazon Prime, and I'm going to be staying up all night tonight breaking down our next Truth in Movies, so I'm pretty excited about that. Oh, that's cool. Right on. Sweet. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else in the chat? It looks like that might be... Oh, we got Sherry333 again, who says, I forgot to say thanks. Well, I should be saying thanks. Mahalo. I appreciate you. That's really awesome. Like, man, you guys make me just beam on the inside, which is an appropriate word, right? All right, cool. I think it's a good time to wrap things up. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you feel like others might get some value from it, or they might appreciate some of the teachings and what I've shared and stuff, right? Or my own insight, share it and share like, right? And if you don't want to share my long videos, I've got a whole playlist of what I call breadcrumbs, or videos that are less than 10 minutes that get right to the point of all of my major, teachings and theories and stuff like that. So feel free to spread the word. The quicker we get to 100,000, the quicker I'm going to give all of you an awesome surprise. It's not easy for me to keep the secret that I've been working on for like almost a year. And very few of you have actually figured out what it is, which is pretty cool. But I can't give it out because I promised myself I wouldn't reveal the prize until we get to 100,000. So we're getting close. How exciting, right? Oh my God. Cool beans, right on. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.